Okay, thank you so much for inviting me here to speak this evening. My name is Laura Gaubert. I grew up in Wisconsin. I currently live in Duluth, Minnesota, and I'm here to provide you with information about Wisconsin's Flambeau Mine. I have a lot of slides to show you, so I've divided the talk into two parts, and we'll just see if we can get to part two or not. I'll start with part one, which will give you some background information about the Flambeau Mine and what's happening to the groundwater over there. It takes about 20 minutes. And then, based on the time, and if you're interested to see more information, I can give you some information about what's going on with the Flambeau River and a tributary at the mine site, a tributary of the Flambeau River that crosses part of the mine site. I'll be moving along fairly quickly with the slides, but please know that all of the slides and all of the references that I'm going to be citing are going to be posted shortly on the Front 40 website and also on a website that I manage. So if you miss something, you'll be able to go online and take a closer look. Before getting started, I'd like to give you a little bit of background information about myself so that you can decide how much weight you want to give my comments. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a hydrogeologist. I'm not here representing any environmental group. I'm a pharmacist by trade who happened to develop a great interest in following developments at the Flambeau mine site. And over the years, I've done a lot of open records requests of the Wisconsin DNR to get the official documents and the monitoring reports for the mine. My mentor, until he passed away several years ago at the age of 90, was Roscoe Churchill of Ladysmith. He served 8 terms on the Rusk County Board during the time period that the Flambeau Mine project was being debated in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And he also witnessed the crafting of Wisconsin's mining laws. And he kept detailed records. He and his wife kept detailed records of all that transpired. Roscoe was also a really good fishing partner. We worked together to co-author a book about the Flambeau Mine that was published several years ago in 2007. It includes a detailed analysis of existing mining regulations that impacted the project and how the groundwater and the surface water at the mine site fared under those regulations. Also, in partnership with Algetics and at the Wisconsin Resources Protection Council and several others, I was an official party to 3 separate legal actions involving the Flambeau mine and involving pollution over there. So that's the type of background I bring to you this evening. You might ask, what does the Flambeau mine have to do with Aquila Resources' Back 40 project and other mining proposals in the Great Lakes region? The answer to that question is plenty, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about. As Al mentioned, mine proponents in the Great Lakes region have drawn heavily on the example of the Flambeau mine in an effort to convince the public, state and federal lawmakers, our county officials, the department regulators. They're trying to convince everyone under the sun that metallic sulfide mining can be done, quote, without polluting local waters. In effect, the Flambeau mine has become the industry's calling card, vaulting it into a position of great importance in this ongoing debate. So I'd like to show you what is being said about the Flambeau mine. Here's what the owner of the Flambeau mine is telling the public. This is posted on their website. They say that testing shows conclusively that groundwater quality surrounding the site is as good as it was before mining. So that sounds pretty great. That's from Rio Tinto. Here's what your neighbors to the north were told. The people who are fighting to protect the Salmon Trout River and Lake Superior from mining impacts associated with the Eagle Mine. This is what they were told. This quote is from the Eagle Mine website. Has there ever been a metallic mineral mine that succeeded in protecting the environment? Answer, yes, the Flambeau Mine. And then they go on to talk about protecting the groundwater at the site, protecting the surrounding environment. They falsely claim that there were never any permit violations. So that's what your neighbors to the north have been told. Here's what John Cherry said. I guess I don't need to repeat it. Al already quoted John Cherry. He was the project manager at the Eagle Mine. Now he's in my state, in Minnesota. You exported him to me. I'm not so happy about that. He claims that the facts, he says the facts show that Flambeau continues to demonstrate the environment is protected. Here's what your neighbors in Minnesota, this is what I'm being told. The people who are fighting to protect Lake Superior and the boundary waters from mining impacts associated with the Polymet and the Twin Metals proposals in Minnesota. This brochure was actually sent to Governor Mark Dayton, and the company is saying, has any copper-nickel mine operated without polluting local waters? Yes. And again, they point to the Flambeau Mine. They actually say that the mine site is home to clean and healthy groundwater of the same quality as before mining took place. They sent this to Governor Dayton. Here's what Wisconsin lawmakers were told about the Flambeau Mine when legislation affecting Gogebic Taconite's proposed iron mine in the Bad River watershed and the Pinocchio Hills was being debated. Are you seeing a pattern here? Before I give you the quote, this is from Stephen Donahue. Now, you may have come across him because he is working on the Back 40 project also. Stephen Donahue is with a firm by the name of Foth out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. They were the primary consultants on the Flambeau Mine. Now he's working on the Back 40 project. He's also working on the Polymet project in Minnesota. He gets around. Here's what he said. Testing on groundwater around the Flambeau Mine site continues to show that groundwater is being protected at this project. And I added this extra quote because I wanted to drive Al wild. Here's what Donahue said. The Flambeau Mine is, quote, an engineering achievement and should be celebrated by the state of Wisconsin rescinding the moratorium on metallic sulfide mining. That was part of his testimony to the Wisconsin lawmakers. Here then is what you are being told about the Flambeau Mine. I pulled this off of Aquila Resources' Facebook page. They're quoting, again, Mr. Donahue from Foth, who worked on the Flambeau Mine, also working on the Back 40. He was quoted as saying that Flambeau was a very successful mining operation, and he says that the Flambeau site and the Back 40 site are very similar, so they're actually using Flambeau as a template for the Back 40 project. So, if Wisconsin's Flambeau Mine is to be used as a template for your project here in Michigan, the Michigan regulators and you deserve to know the answers to two very important questions. Number one, is it fair to compare the Back 40 project to the Flambeau Mine? Or is it like comparing apples and oranges? Secondly, what does the water quality data on file with the Wisconsin DNR for the Flambeau Mine really show? Were the streams and groundwater reserves at the Flambeau Mine site protected, as people like Stephen Donahue have suggested? Now, I'm not here to tell you what to believe about the Flambeau Mine. I'm here to provide you with the facts so that you can make up your own minds about where Flambeau should fit into the Back 40 debate. So let's start with some background information on the Flambeau Mine. I just wanted to show you where it's located. Here's where Rusk County is in Wisconsin relative to where you are over here in Menominee County. Here's Rusk County. The Flambeau mine was built right on the banks of the Flambeau River. This is the project site. It's actually in the Mississippi watershed. It's not in the Lake Superior watershed, but it's still an important watershed. Just a few facts about the Flambeau mine. You hear about it all the time, but I just wanted to give you a couple little facts. The investor was Kennecott, which is owned by Rio Tinto out of London. The consultant is Foth, and that's important because Foth is also your consultant on the back 40, or I should say Aquila Resources consultant. The mine operated for about 4 years. It was about 180 acres in size. The open pit, 32 acres. They mined copper, silver, gold, and zinc. But the bottom one, this is what I really want you to know, tailings, and Al talked about this. The Flambeau deposit was rich enough that they could ship all of the ore up to Canada on rail cars. That's where the smelter was. The smelter is up in Canada. The ore was processed at Noranda's smelter in Rouen, Quebec, and Falcon Bridge's facilities in Timmins, Ontario. So that's where the tailings are. That's where the tailings were generated, and that's where they were disposed. We don't have toxic tailings at the Flambeau mine site. I wanted to show you a few views, and remember, it's Mr. Donahue's own words. Flambeau is your template for what to expect at the back 40. Look at this. Here's the Flambeau River, here's the pit, and you can see how very close it was to the river, 140 feet. Also, please notice how steep the walls of the pit were. I don't know if they're going to be doing them that steep at back 40, but what we found was that due to the low rock strength, the mine's steep walls had to be reinforced with bolts, wire mesh, and metal strapping to prevent collapse. And you might notice on these slides, I've got footnotes. Everything I'm telling you, I have referenced. So when you go to a meeting, you wouldn't get anywhere quoting Laura Gauger. But if you go and take a look at that reference, you can actually click on it the way I've got it set up on the website. You can click on it and you can bring up this article for yourself. And then you can quote it directly, which will carry a lot more weight if you're submitting comments, if you can go to an original document. So that's how it's set up. Here's another photo. The Flambeau River experienced major flooding while the mine was operating. It came to within 20 horizontal feet and 4 vertical feet of spilling into the mine pit. That happened in 1994. You should see how they were scrambling, the reports of how they were scrambling, worrying that the river was going to breach into the pit. Here's another view from that flood. And again, Mr. Donahue's words, this is your template for the back 40. The rains were so heavy when that happened, that flooding, that the pumps that were in the bottom of the pit couldn't keep up with all the water coming in. So this lake formed in the bottom of the pit during that time period. And look how dirty the water looks too. Here's another view. This is the wastewater treatment plant that was operating at the Flambeau mine during the mining years. The dirty runoff water was getting collected in 2 different ponds, and again you can see how dirty the water looks. That water then was pumped into the wastewater treatment plant, it was cleaned up, and then the water was discharged into the Flambeau River. Another thing I want you to see on this slide are these piles. Those are the ore piles that were waiting to get shipped to Canada for processing. Over here we've got waste rock. See, Flambeau didn't have the fine tailings, the nasty stuff from processing, but Flambeau still had a lot of waste rock. You know, the big chunks of rock that they were digging up, and they piled them up on the side of the pit during the mining years, And when they were done mining, they pushed all that waste rock back into the pit. One more slide, just to make the point. Look at that rich, shimmering ore. Look at how it's sparkling. Okay, the rich, shimmering ore from the Flambeau mine, that's what got shipped to Canada. The pollution-generating waste rock was left behind and eventually buried in the unlined mine pit. But get this, I told you about that wastewater treatment plant that took all the junk out of the water. Well, the sludge from the wastewater treatment plant, what do you think they did with that? At the end of mining, they pushed it into the unlined pit. So it seemed rather hypocritical to me. You know, they clean up this water during the mining years, and all the junk they took out of it, it eventually ended up getting pushed back into the unlined pit. Couple side-by-side comparisons of Flambeau and the back 40. The size of the Flambeau pit was about 32 acres compared to about 83 acres is what they're saying for the back 40. Flambeau produced about 2 million tons of ore. Back 40, they're claiming it'll be 12.5 million tons of ore, so a lot more, a lot bigger mine. The waste rock, Flambeau produced about 9 million tons. They're claiming that the back 40 is going to produce 54 million tons of waste rock. The main thing again too, no tailings at Flambeau. Look, 12 million tons of tailings at the back 40. And they want you to believe that Flambeau is supposed to make you feel okay about moving ahead. One other point I wanted to mention, a finer point, but at Flambeau, because it was so close to the river, the company built what they called an underground cutoff wall. It was between the pit and the river, and it was supposed to help prevent groundwater from moving back and forth. They want to do that at the Back 40 project too. And I can show you how things didn't turn out so well at Flambeau with that cutoff wall. So, Flambeau versus Back 40, is it a fair comparison or apples and oranges? You decide. I'd now like to move on to talk about Mr. Donahue's assertion that the groundwater at Flambeau is, quote, being protected. You know, sure, there are some wells at the Flambeau mine site that are clean. They're the ones that are what you would call upgradient of where the pit is. But I want to show you what's happening to the wells that really matter, the ones that are in the line of flow from the backfilled pit to the Flambeau River. Now to do that, I have to show you a couple slides that might be a little boring, but it'll help you understand the importance of what I'm going to show you next. This diagram shows where the wells are located at the Flambeau mine site. Here's the backfilled pit, and I highlighted in yellow the wells that I want you to know about. These are the wells that are drilled within the backfilled pit. This well is called Monitoring Well 1013. It's right here. It's like 600 feet from the Flambeau River. I also want to show you what happened to this well, Monitoring Well 1000 PR, it's called. It's directly between the pit and the river. And here's the kicker. It's on the river side of the mine's underground cutoff wall. So you can see how well that wall worked, you know, in terms of keeping contaminants from the pit from getting into the river. So first, cartoonist Bill Krapinski pretty much captured what's going on with the groundwater at Flambeau. Here's Granny getting kind of shaky off of drinking the water because of the high levels of manganese that Al mentioned to you. The baseline manganese at Flambeau ranged from about 190 to 350 parts per billion. Pardon me, but I'm a pharmacist. I have to tell you, parts per billion are the same as micrograms per liter. Because some of my graphs are in micrograms per liter, same thing. So baseline, the public health standard is 300 parts per billion. Mr. Donahue's firm, your Mr. Donahue, Foth, predicted that when they were done mining, that the manganese levels would go from this baseline of 350 up to 550. That's what everybody was told. Now that we have the real data coming in, levels have been reported as high as 42,000. Donohue's firm told the public it would top off at 550. Now this is no small matter. Consuming water with high manganese levels has been linked to causing the kind of nerve damage seen in Parkinson's disease. Now, Bill Krapinski is a great cartoonist. I'm more into graphs. So this graph shows you what Bill put into the cartoon. I just want to point out these really tiny little bars. Okay, that was the baseline, what the public health standard is, and what Donohue's firm told everybody would happen after they were done mining. Those are those little bars. This is what we've got.
Oh boy.
And that well I told you about, that's between the cutoff wall and the river. Well, this is cool. Here, these low bars in here, this is what happened during the mining years when they were treating the water. They had that water treatment plant running during the mining years. So that's why the manganese levels stayed low. The water was being treated. Here, this is 1997 on the graph. That's when they stopped mining and they backfilled the pit and they shut down the water treatment plant. Look how the levels bumped. So that's what's happening now. That's what's happening now. And that's, that well is on the river side of the cutoff wall. That's what's important about this, because the cutoff wall is what's supposed to be protecting the river. Couple more slides. You might say, okay, Laura, are you just picking, cherry picking these terrible examples and they really aren't very widespread? That can happen. But no, this chart, there are 8 wells within the backfill pit, and there are 3 wells directly between the pit and the river. So we've got 11 wells. 9 of the 11 wells have gone bonkers on manganese. So it's not just the 2 wells that I showed you. There are only 2 wells that are in an acceptable range on manganese. Then you might say, well, what's this manganese all the time? Is it the only pollutant maybe? Or did anything else go bad? Well, manganese, for some reason, appears to be the most widespread pollutant, but other things have gone high as well. I wanted to show you sulfate. In Minnesota, there's very great concern over what sulfate would do to the wild rice beds in the surface waters. And I imagine this is important here too. I'm a Minnesotan. You guys know best what's happening over here, but I know it's a big issue for us. So I wanted to show you some sulfate numbers. Look at how clean the water was before they mined. This little blip, that's the sulfate level in that well before they mined. The wild rice standard in Minnesota is 10 milligrams per liter. That's that little blip. Look what this well went up to, 2,400. And according to Stephen Donohue's firm, the water in this well is headed for the Flambeau River through fractured bedrock. And again, it's not just one well. 9 of the 11 wells within the backfill pit or between the pit and the river are exceeding this baseline by at least 15 times. So it's important, that you can establish significance. It's not just one example. It's not just one thing. There's a real pattern here. So now this is where things get interesting. Does the public have any legal recourse for the high levels of contaminants that I was showing you in these graphs? What does the law say? Well, for that, and I won't spend much time on it, but the part of Wisconsin law that deals with groundwater at mine sites, it's chapter NR 182 of the Wisconsin Administrative Code, And the particular section that deals with groundwater enforcement is this one, 182.075. And again, this is all going to be posted on that website. So if you want to look at any of this more closely, it's all there. But in a nutshell, Wisconsin law requires the establishment of what is known as a, quote, compliance boundary. That's where the state of Wisconsin enforces the law. Okay? And the way the law is written is that you've got your mine like sitting right here. The company can legally pollute the water, and the state isn't going to do anything until the water gets 1,200 feet out from where the waste was buried. So that's like almost a quarter of a mile. You know, so the area within the boundary, I call it the groundwater sacrifice zone. It's the area where no standards are going to be enforced. Here's how it looks at Flambeau. You see this dark line going around the mine site? That's the 1,200-foot compliance boundary. Here's the backfilled pit. You go 1,200 feet out, and that's where the state of Wisconsin is going to enforce the law. You see this weird shape in the corner? Where it's got like a little square section? The reason that's there is that the way the law works is that you can go 1,200 feet out unless you run into private property, somebody else's property. If you do, then they're going to enforce at the property boundary. So the furthest out they can go is 1,200 feet, and it might be less than 1,200 feet if somebody has some land butting up closer. So, here's an overhead of the Flambeau mine. That compliance boundary I showed you goes all around here. It even goes to the other side of the Flambeau River. It covers about 500 acres. And this is from a very small mine. The compliance boundary is 500 acres. That's the size of the groundwater sacrifice zone, 500 acres. So again, according to the law, there's no state enforceable groundwater standards within that boundary. They're only going to enforce when the dirty water gets across. So here's what I want you to know. I'm sorry it took this long to get here, but I had to lead up to it. The pollution that I showed you in all of those graphs, it's technically legal. It cannot be prosecuted in state of Wisconsin court. Al and I wanted to sue them on groundwater. We found we couldn't. So here then, when mining advocates tell you, here in Michigan and Wisconsin, that the Flambeau mine was, quote, successful, and that it operated, quote, in full compliance with Wisconsin's laws. It's not that the groundwater is clean. You saw the graphs. It's that the pollution has been legalized. They're playing word games with you, with all of us. If they tell you that they are not violating the law, wouldn't you assume that the water is clean? But that's not what it means, because the law has legalized the pollution. So they can tell you that they're in compliance. They are. But they're not telling you that they were given an exemption, that they don't have to meet the standards. That's the game that they're playing throughout the whole Great Lakes region. Now it bears repeating. Here's what Back 40 consultant Stephen Donahue has said about the Flambeau mine. Testing on groundwater around the Flambeau mine site continues to show that groundwater is being protected at this project. You saw the graphs, you saw the dirty water, this is Rio Tinto's own data. It didn't come from an environmental group or anyone else. It's their own data that I got from the DNR. Mr. Donahue claims Flambeau was successful and that the Back 40 and Flambeau are very similar, so it's the template. Flambeau is the template for your project. Now I've shown you the graphs for manganese and sulfate. I just have a couple more. Here's iron. Iron is also a problem. The iron levels in the groundwater at the Flambeau mine site are up to 300 times higher than they were before the mine was built. And they're up to 45 times higher than predicted by Stephen Donahue's firm. So again, here are the little bars that show you what we had before, and that's what we got. It just keeps going up. 15,000. Donahue's firm said it would be 320. Copper. This comes into play because of fish. The baseline at Flambeau was quite low in copper. It's way down here, 11 parts per billion. Foth told the public that when they were done mining, it would be at 14. That was their fancy groundwater modeling. That well's gone over 800. Now, in all fairness, they haven't exceeded the drinking water standard on copper. It's pretty high, 1,300. But look at the standard for fish. In surface water, the standard for fish is about 6. Copper is very toxic to fish. So this dirty water, it's groundwater, but according to Foth, it's getting into the Flambeau River. This slide sums up how far off Foth was in predicting all of these numbers that are truly very important numbers. Copper, they predicted 14 micrograms per liter. I showed you the graph. There's a well that's over 800. For iron, they predicted 320 micrograms per liter. I showed you the graph. Their own data, the company's own data, gone as high as 15,000. They predicted 550 on manganese. You saw the graph, 42,000. Sulfate, they predicted it would be 1,100, 1,300 in that range. The graph I showed you is double that. So they were way off. And again, this, according to Mr. Donahue, is the template for the back 40. So when mining advocates say the Flambeau mine was successful and that it operated in full compliance with the law, again, please remember, that doesn't mean the groundwater is clean. It means that, in the case of Flambeau, the pollution was legalized, so that's why they can tell you that they're in compliance with the law. So why then are we being bombarded with all these claims that the Flambeau mine operated without polluting local waters? As Al pointed out, and I can go through this fast because he did a good job going through it, no metallic sulfide mine has ever operated anywhere in the world without polluting local waters. So the Back 40 supporters, they're scrambling to try to come up with an example of a non-polluting mine so that everybody can feel okay about moving forward. The Flambeau mine, groomed by the industry to fill that role, is the closest they've come, as far as I can tell. But those aerial photographs that are provided by Foth belie what's happening beneath the surface of the grassed-over Flambeau mine site and within its waters. As my buddy Roscoe said, it's just grass over a grave. So this is the first part of what I wanted to tell you tonight. We started the presentation with 2 questions that needed to be answered. Does it make sense to compare the Flambeau mine to the Back 40 project when you're trying to decide on what you should do here in Michigan, or what the state of Michigan should do? And secondly, does the Flambeau mine live up to all that hype that I gave you the examples of what everybody's saying? Now, I've provided you with the facts, so you can answer those questions for yourself. So at this stage, I knew that my talk was going to go long, so I divided it into 2 parts. This was part 1. If you have any questions for me right now, I'm glad to try to answer them. If you're interested to get a little more information about what's happening in the Flambeau River, I can give you that. So it's your call. Yes?
Yeah, do you have data at that moment?
Oh, I'm glad let me show you this. I got to back up and show you that slide here. Do you see this one yellow box? That's the only well. This compliance boundary is like 3.7 miles long. The Wisconsin DNR only required the company to drill one well. There are 2 wells at the same site, drilled to different depths. That's the only well anywhere near where the company would be held accountable for pollution. The levels, this well is looking okay. But why wouldn't it when the company's saying that this is where the dirty water is going? You know, some of it looks like it would veer over this way. That's what these arrows are from a company drawing. But yeah, there's only one set of wells along the entire boundary, and it seems to have been placed in a way where it wouldn't show a whole lot. That's my unprofessional opinion on that one. Any other questions? Yes?
So there's no data from outside that box anywhere in the area, or is it just a matter of time before it disperses that far, or they just don't have it?
They're not, I haven't found any data for anything other than these wells that are within the compliance boundary where they can't be held accountable for anything. And this one well, where they could be held accountable. But again, it's not really positioned in a place that you would think would show where the real problem is going to be. Yes?
Do either you or Al have any information on how many people got jobs from the local community? What were their wages?
Yeah.
How much money did the mine companies make from this?
Yeah, I did go through, when Roscoe and I worked on that book project, we did go through the economics. I can't remember the numbers now off the top of my head, but if you go, the book that we did is now available online as a free download. So anybody can get that information. We graphed it all out. And the economic input, we called it flatline.
What's the name of it again?
It's called The Buzzards Have Landed.
Thank you.
The real story of the Flambeau mine. Roscoe always referred to mining people as buzzards. No offense to buzzards.
Laura, thank you very much. That was very informational.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little bit of some music here real quick.